Hello and welcome to AviaDev Insight Africa, the podcast offering a window to the world of African aviation with your host, John Howell, CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa. Today, we are discussing the link between flight safety and insurance premiums. And joining me to discuss this are Denis Kulikov, who is the Deputy CEO at AI12, and Michael Jonga, Director Africa, also at AI12. Together, over the next half an hour or so, we're going to unpack how insurance plays a crucial role in airline operations, in financing and commercial performance, but also how a safety culture can really support the insurance premiums that an airline is able to achieve. Now, with a combined wealth of experience in global insurance and African aviation, Denis and Michael are going to explore how all of this comes together and how it affects the African environment. So welcome to the podcast, gents. Great to have you with us.
Great to be here, John. Always lovely to engage with you.
Yeah, likewise. And welcome back, Denis. We had you on the podcast last year, so it's great to see how things have moved on. And of course, both of you will be with us at AviaDev in a few weeks' time, and we'll come to that a little bit later. But what I'd like to do, Denis, is start with you. And just for the benefit of our listeners who aren't that well-versed necessarily in the whole aviation insurance market, I think a great place always to start is just to give us that helicopter view of what insurance is required for an airline to operate. And this is an airline anywhere in the world, but of course it applies to the African airlines too.
I'll try to be really short here. So insurance being the tool of risk management and the main need for that for the airline is to make sure that in case of an incident or a massive accident, there is a financial protection in case the risk takes place. That's the main idea of that. However, there are some additional drivers. Leasing companies, they demand certain also coverage and protection for their aircraft leased out to the airlines. Then we have authorities of different countries, starting from the European Union. They have special standard regulation and Montreal Convention, Warsaw Convention. All these system of legal liability requires that airline purchase liability insurance. I would say these three are the main sources, the main need for airlines to purchase insurance protection.
Yeah, and without this, obviously, they're not able to operate. It's as simple as that. This isn't a nice to have. This is mandatory. But of course, there are ways, and I think you've talked about this before, there are optional insurance and there's mandatory. There's a little difference there. So can you just quickly tell us about that as well?
The first, when you say mandatory insurance, most probably you will be talking about local legislation. Because different countries, they have their own laws, their own regulations for carriers, for operators. And to be honest, it's always relatively small. However, it is there, and you have to be in line with certain wording, with certain rules, with certain insurance companies even. Second thing, if you operate to certain places, European Union, Turkey, Hong Kong, some other countries, authorities there also have their must requirements towards insurance precisely, not only liability, but insurance in place. And that would also affect and can be considered a mandatory. All the rest, to be honest, to the choice of the airline. So the scope of coverage, the type of coverage, where the coverage is placed, that's up to the airline. And somewhere in between, we have leasing companies, which is actually commercial entities, and it's about partnership relationship between the lessor and the lessee, which is the airlines. But in my experience, and I'm almost 20 years in this business, I've never met two soft leasing companies, and the way they treat these requirements might be considered a mandatory as well.
Yeah, again, you're not going to be able to lease. It's going to be in the terms and conditions. This is the insurance we expect you to have because it's our asset that you're using. And then, of course, there are these different types of leases. And you guys are involved with ACMI, which includes the insurance when the airline would obviously lease that particular aircraft for a season. So that's the aircraft, the crew, the maintenance, the insurance. It's often used for short term or for seasonal. And we're really seeing a growth in that. And you're quite involved in that because, of course, the Avia Solutions Group has so many ACMI providers, many of which will be at AviaDev as well. So when it comes to that, the insurance comes with it, right? That's something that I think is good to clear up right at the beginning here as well.
Correct. But in this case, it's not mandatory. It's ACMI contracts are really negotiable. And that's where I think airlines can and should educate their employees to be able to actually understand what are they paying for and whether this is enough or they might want to purchase something in addition.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, it's the layers of complexity. And the reason that this is such a great place to start is that you've just returned from the AFRA Stakeholders Convention in Kigali. You delivered a masterclass. You were on the Sky Connect the week before. And I've been going to aviation events in Africa for over a decade. And it's only recently that this topic has even come up. And of course, especially from an AviaDev perspective, what we're absolutely focused on is improving the commercial environment for the airlines, for the airports, for the suppliers, for everyone. Because if you're stronger commercially, you can make more investments. We can have a safer, more robust, more profitable industry as a whole. And often the conversation when it comes to costs and airlines is focused on fuel. It's focused on maintenance. It's focused on human resources, training. All of those things are absolutely vital. But aviation insurance, as we've just discussed, is mandatory to some extent, or it's mandatory 100%, but in terms of how much insurance you decide to take is optional. And so can you elaborate a little bit on your experience, what you talked about for those who weren't in the room in Kigali and didn't have the benefit of that session?
Yeah, sure. I hope they felt that they had a benefit. I was talking about the connection and integration, maybe, between aviation insurance and flight safety. Because at the end of the day, I was talking more about claims perspective. So this is one of the angle of my point of interest and responsibilities with AI12, claims handling. I love to do such things because that's exactly where the airline engineering perspective and flight safety perspective can meet insurance and be friend with insurance, because normally the guys from engineering and flight safety, they don't love white collars because they think they're just wasting the money they earn and they take care of. But indeed we're not, because actually when the claim happens, that's where you do understand why you purchase insurance. And so I gave them different perspectives of what we do and how we do that, and gave them numerous examples from my personal experience, from the experience of my colleagues, how difficult the claim can be, and how cooperation between aviation risk managers, aviation engineers, and the insurance broker can help the airline to bypass and make the best out of the insurance coverage in case of accident or incidents.
I might add to that, Dennis, because I was in the audience listening to you as well, obviously there as your colleague. To your point, Dennis, on the aspect of educating, be the airlines and their employees on the perception and the perspective of insurance. And John as well, just touching on your point in mentioning that the insurance topic is something that's come up recently, but obviously it's not something that's new to the industry. It's always been there. And it's something that airlines have always known you have to deal with or factor into your business to a certain degree. And from the perspective of Dennis, your masterclass at AFRA, and just the perception and the response there, I want to reference to the work that someone does with Rafaela Dwaba with her program, the Girls Fly Program Africa, and the work that she does to increase the exposure of aviation across different education levels, tertiary, secondary, primary, high school levels. And I think it's similar now where within Africa, there is a transition now where, Dennis, you and I'm sure other people in the industry as well are working towards increasing that exposure of insurance, increasing their understanding of how that works in their business and how they can better understand it.
Do you know, I think that's such a great point, because actually what I do is the same. So when I started doing route development conferences, route development was not a discipline within a lot of these countries, because what a lot of countries have is they have a civil aviation authority, or they had a civil aviation authority that was a regulator, a legislator, but it wasn't a business development. It didn't think about marketing. It didn't think about engaging its customers. And what we've seen over the years is that a lot of countries have now created an airport authority and a civil aviation, and the airport authority looks after the commercial side, and they're the guys that will come to AviaDev to obviously have those commercial conversations. So yes, it's not that different. And I really love your example of Rafilwe, because Rafilwe is a valued advisory board member of AviaDev. She will be at AviaDev in Zanzibar. We're working together on the outreach programs, but it's all about the ripple effect of that, which I think is the point here. The more we talk about it, and the more that we can build from there. So I think that's such a great point. So I want to stick with you, Michael, now, because you're engaging with the African airlines regularly. And I would really like a kind of situation report of where we are with those airlines in terms of right now, and when you came into the industry and when AI12 really started doing things in Africa, how much more were the African airlines paying for insurance? What were they missing at that point, and maybe still are? And this is the gap that you're trying to close, right?
This is a question that comes up quite a lot, and both Dennis and I, we smile quite a lot. And so to answer the question here, or rather to explore it, I'm going to take a slightly different approach, because it's yes, on one hand, the straightforward answer, which Dennis and myself would give, is that yes, there are higher associated premiums, with Africa being viewed, again, by London underwriters, European underwriters, as having, let's say, a higher risk profile. But I don't want to focus on the insurance aspect. I want to switch more to the aviation aspect, on safety, right? Where safety has and always has been and always will be a key pillar of the industry. And in particular, IATA uses a very interesting safety metric, a metric which is IATA's accidents per million sectors. And essentially, this is the number of accidents that occur per 1 million flight sectors. Flight sector would be considered takeoff and landing. Right. Now, when you put that in context, when you look at Africa in context of the full industry, obviously there have been a lot of improvements that have been made over the past decade. In particular, just looking at some of IATA's reports, especially on Africa, right? Africa had an improvement from about 10.8 accidents per million sectors. This is in 2022, which dropped down as an improvement to about 6.3 in 2023. This then increased, however, in 2024, while having increased to about 8.36 per million flight sectors, but no fatalities involved, but still having the highest accident rate across the different regions. Now, on the insurance aspect, airlines and aviation see risk, or they see insurance as a financial aspect that someone else should cover, right? It should be always a protection for their business, their assets, for lessors as well, their assets in operations. Whereas when you look at how the underwriters would be viewing that, or how the insurance market would be viewing that, they see it as, what is the possibility of the occurrence of a certain accident or an incident, right? So there are certain factors, be it safety statistics, that come into play, be it human factor as well, which come into play. But perception is really important, because that then, the combination of all those factors comes down to how the risk profile of a region, or the risk profile of Africa and operating in the continent, comes down. Now, I want to give context for where Africa's, let's say, risk or safety metrics are, and where the rest of the world, or the other regions of the world, where their safety profiles are. And this is according to IATA. So, for example, in 2024, you had North America with about 1.53 per million sectors. So this is, which improved to 1.2 in 2024. Asia Pacific, they had a 1.04 in 2024. Middle East and Africa, or combined Middle East, a 1.08 in 2024. Commonwealth areas, 1.05. Europe, 1.02, 2024. LATAM, 1.77. And then when you come to Africa, and what our metric was in 2024, that was 10.59. So 10.59 accidents per million sectors in 2024. So there have been improvements, yes, in terms of the overall pushes and initiative towards safety, improving safety and operations within the continent. But there's still quite a lot of work that needs to be done, both on educating the airlines and as well as educating the insurance market of some of these developments happening as well. So there are a lot of combinational factors that come into play here. And I'm sure even Denis can add to that as well.
Yeah, I think I will come to you now, Denis, because, what you're saying there, Michael, I think is just the statistics. That's how these guys work, right? And if it's 10x what the average is or what it is in another part of the world, you might say, okay, my risk is 10 times as much. I'm going to charge 10 times as much for the premium. And I'll get your input on that, Denis, for sure, because I'm sure that's not quite right. But what it's about, and what I think you were trying to do this week, and what I'm sure you were able to do, is show people their role in the commercial performance of an airline is impacted not just by the safety, but also just the processes that are followed and creating confidence in that market. You said, Michael, that obviously most of these accidents that happened, they didn't have any fatalities, which is obviously we're all thankful for that, but they do have an impact on a lessor's liability, and there are insurance claims. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Denis, in terms of, yes, there's perception. We all want to change the perception, but you've got to be backed up by the statistics and the hard evidence of what is that number. I haven't heard those numbers before, Michael, so it's really interesting to hear them and quite sobering. Even though it's a tiny number, it's still a lot bigger than other parts of the world.
I might just add that it's public knowledge, right? It's IATA's reporting, which is available to anyone who would just go on Google and type in, all right, what's IATA's safety report for the year X? And they can get that information. So it's information that's a fingertip
It's not up
away.
for debate. Yeah.
Exactly.
Simple as that. But yeah, Denis, fill us in on this side of things.
Yeah, first of all, I don't like statistics to be used in this raw manner. Let's call it this way. So statistic is good when you need to present the big picture, but when you are doing business with a particular airline, with a particular people, you have to know your client. We all love this KYC thing, but it became a formal thing. But to know your client, really, you have to visit the company, you have to see the safety procedures yourself. In this case, only you as an underwriter or you as an insurance provider can really assess the risk. If you're sitting at your offices, you have never seen what you're actually insuring, no statistics, no fancy presentation will do the deal. That's to start with. Second thing, it's funny you mentioned that there are certain costs that airline bear, leasing companies or fueling. And again, since I started in 2006, fuel prices and leasing rents are going up steadily, while insurance rates are going down normally. And whenever we have discussions with airlines, they do expect their costs on insurance to go down. And they will never listen to any reasoning for why they should go up. I really wonder what kind of spell people who sell fuel and sell leased aircraft have. What do they do? So, yeah.
I think that's probably, from a leasing perspective, it's a bit more of a tangible asset. Hey, there's only this many aircraft, you want one, and there's more demand than supply. We can produce that. Fueling, I'm not sure. That's very sort of artificial, that market, within reason. But I agree with you. My insurance, when we're thinking about personal insurance, I expect it goes up every single year. It's just the way it works. But you then, and we'll come to this shortly, it's about then shopping around and finding the right coverage and the right fit. But I think your point is really interesting in that you need to dive a bit deeper into what were these accidents, which aircraft, in which markets were this. And if you're not in that market, if you're not insuring that type of aircraft, then surely the risk is much, much lower. And it's a bit like when people say, oh, what's Africa like? And you say, what do you mean? Africa, what's it like? And then you say, which country? And they say, oh, South Africa. And you say, yeah, it's great. Which bit of South Africa? Because it's completely different if you go east, west, north, south, on the coast, in the highlands, whatever. And it's exactly the same here, that you've got to look at the risk and the risk of what it is that you're insuring, rather than just this perception helicopter view. So my question to you, just to close this bit off, Denis, is that how an underwriter works, or do they not do that homework to dive deep enough? Or is that your job to convince them that, hey, I know what you think about Africa. This is this client. I've done the research and this is what you're insuring and why we should get a better premium.
Precisely. This is the job. I think this is the job of the broker to make this happen, because underwriter himself normally would not be in a position, and this is not their primary task, to go and to establish relationship with the airline. This is what broker exists for. Second, I would think of the role of risk manager or insurance manager or any person in charge for insurance costs in insurance, in aviation, in airline, to make this happen. Because, again, the formal process would be, this is our profile, this is the information. The airline would send it to the broker, and the broker will do the deal with underwriters. But without actually presenting the risk, without actually looking behind or inside the papers, you'll just get the perception you've given precisely. All right, the statistic says 10 times less safe, the price goes 10 times up, full stop. Yeah, brokers and people inside the airline who are in charge, those are the two who must, I think, really must arrange that and make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael, let me come back to you because Denis has touched on this as well, but misconceptions from the customer's perspective. So we talked a little bit there about the broker underwriter relationship, but obviously when you're engaging with a customer, with an airline straight away, some of the things that they've got misconceptions around aviation insurance, being able to shop around, understanding what factors it is that you need to be able to give them a better price, this kind of partnership approach rather than it being something where they just take what they're given or whatever it may be. What have your experiences been like over the last few years engaging with the airlines in this respect?
This is actually a topic that Denis talks about quite nicely. So on my side, I'm going to keep it short, but Denis, I want to throw this over to you. But I think it's the theme of partnership where, and this has always been a theme that's come up within the African aviation industry in terms of collaboration, be it locally, domestically, regionally, and across the continent. And partnership, not just looking within Africa, looking across the world, has been a key initiative or a key, shall I say, pillar, helping push forward development across various businesses. Now, for insurance, as looking at insurance, really, which Denis mentioned before, it's rather than seeing it as something that you deal with once a year with individuals who are on another continent, you may not even meet face to face. Rather, its positioning today, I believe, is more of a tool for the airline, not just to be better protected, to have assurance or have a calm state within the business while you're operating, knowing that you are covered, you have implemented the right practices. But on that point, using insurance to educate yourself as an airline on the practices that you can have within the airline to improve your safety. Safety, regardless of insurance, is a valuable and an unreplaceable metric. So I think it's some of those misconceptions, again, not seeing it as just something that you deal with once a year or a couple of months before your renewal, but rather seeing it more as a tool to better the airline safety, to better your understanding of how you can improve your operations, make them a bit more efficient. And of course, having the right partners, counselors or advisors that can guide you within that insurance environment, because it's a very different environment, it's a very different language that people use and approach within the insurance market in comparison to aviation. So you do need partners who help you to better understand that. And of course, making sure that you as a business or as an airline or as an operator, airport, MRO, training school, that the partner makes sure that you're in the best position to make a decision. And I'm sure Denis can also add on that as well.
To be honest, you actually said the major points of that. There are some discrepancies of understanding what insurance is and what is it for. Sometimes, which we sometimes meet when we talk to the airlines, to the heads of the airlines or the owners of the airlines. For instance, some airlines think, well, all right, I purchased insurance. That means that I everything will be reimbursed, not actually uh, treating how actually the insurance works. For instance, if this is a malfunction or a technical issue, this is not covered, so this has to be a insurable event. If an airline decides to purchase a brand new part that has been damaged, then again, it would be arguably covered, because if it was repairable, then the insurers will be expecting that the airline will be using the repaired part rather than purchasing a brand new. So there are some discrepancies, and sometimes it causes misunderstanding between the insured and insurers. As Michael said, education. You can't pay less attention to make sure that you're working with professionals and professionals are working for you. That's a core of actually good business. Invest in people, invest in something that you're surely taking the best out of it. That will secure your position, that will make sure that you get the best possible thing for your money, and actually at the end of the day it will make you pay less.
Yeah. I suppose for me, to summarize what I've heard, it's about seeing the broker as a co-pilot, because they're in the cockpit with you, right? And also they've got more hours than you because they're the insurance experts and they're working for you. When airlines meet you, they've got to see you as an ally, because of course it's in your interest, their interest, to work on their behalf to get the best price and that's why we use brokers, because they know their business. So I think what I would like to do before we close off is just some of the practical steps. And I'm sure you get asked this all the time, and it was a big focus from a safety perspective. The practical steps that the airlines can make to get themselves better positioned to get better premiums going forward, because it is not an insubstantial amount of their overhead, and their balance sheet is spent on insurance. And why spend more? But also don't spend not enough and not have the required insurance, because you'll only know that when there's an incident, and then suddenly that could be the end of the airline if you don't have the required insurance. So what would your advice be to those airlines that are saying, what do I do now? How do I engage? Where do I go next?
First, to start with, I think it's a choice of a good partner. Not because I'm the broker, but again, you have to choose the partner and go through the whole process, rather than what sometimes airlines are doing: ask 3, 4, 5, 6 different brokers, which actually would do the same, and it would look like, I will give you a metaphor. You came to a shop and you want to buy something from that shop. This shop will provide only this scope of goods. And you're asking 7 different people to go to that shop and ask for the price. So that's how it looks.
Yeah.
All right. For instance, I don't speak this language. I need to translate it. Choose one and make sure that this one will do the best deal for you.
But that could also have an impact on your credit score, right? In terms of every time you go, then of course they're doing all these checks on you. So it's actually it's a negative, right? It's time consuming. You're not going to get a different result, and it could be negative for the business. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when there are a wild tender, when several of our colleagues / competitors are running around the insurance market together with us, trying to place the risk, and underwriters at a certain point, underwriters saying, please stop.
Stop I've heard this before. Yeah.
So this is the price. Whoever wins the business gets the same price. So please stop doing it. And so that's what happens. Second thing, when the airline chooses the consultant / broker, the strategy is set up. So what airline would like to present, what kind of message it sends. We are an established airline with this fleet, and we are going to do for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years this. With no development, with no shrinking or whatever. So that's what we're doing. Second option, we are a developing airline, and we're starting from this point, and in 5 years we see ourselves here. That's another type of presentation, and it will definitely affect the pricing. We're a national carrier, we're a charter airline, we're a cargo airline. So how you present yourself, what kind of risk and a risk perception you want to have. A third, but not like from the meaningful, but the third thing is safety. We invest in safety. We hired an experienced safety manager. We set up different trainings for our safety team. We're taking care of this, we're taking care of that. We're hiring only exclusively experienced pilots, so we have these standards. We are sending them to different trainings, including special trainings in difficult environment, difficult airports, and so on. If we are an airline that operates into some hotspots, now we're monitoring the situation. We have a special risk management solution, and so we're focused on changing the whole operation in case the risk is switched from yellow zone to red or from red to unbearable, and so on. So if you present properly in that stance, that would be good. After that goes maintenance, how you service your aircraft, which professional service providers are there, and do you have any kind of spare pools or special agreements for spare supply and so on. That would be it, I think. So
I might even just expand on that, Denis, in the sense that it's, in addition to airlines, and especially in the context of Africa, it's a collaborative effort, across everyone operating within the continent, right? Seeing from regulators and oversight bodies and how they can improve safety initiatives across various airspaces, maybe unionize through the air for the whole of the continent, improvements in infrastructure. So this is more for airports now, and how they're upgrading their airport facilities. You've also got improvements in data gathering as well as documentation, again, which comes down into reflecting, be it a business, an airline, an MRO, and airport's understanding of what are some of their internal statistics, as well as improvements in safety culture, training, putting in that time, putting in that investment to training your staff, your employees, your crews, your pilots, your ground handling staff, again, showing that initiative, showing that commitment towards your investment in safety and just an understanding of improving your business. So again, just a general overview of some of those practical steps.
Yeah, if I was to summarize what you've said, I think it's build confidence, right? It's build confidence and be confident in your story, but not just that. Build confidence by telling the full story and giving all the information rather than leaving that gap, which then will be filled with the worst possible scenario by the underwriter, right? If you don't tell them, they're just going to assume you don't have it, and that's not going to help your case. I think your point there, Michael, as well about the infrastructure side, I just interviewed a couple of days ago the Director General of the Somali Civil Aviation Authority. What they've done in the last 7 years is transformational in terms of taking back their airspace from ICAO and now upgrading it with the highest quality air traffic navigation aids. What does that do? That makes a safer airspace. Therefore, that is going to have an impact downstream on things like the airlines that use that airspace. And there may be a perception about Somalia's airspace, and that now the evidence can change. The perception is based on what's happened in the past. The truth is what we need to tell, which is what's happening now. What grading is this? And that's why you have organizations like ICAO, et cetera, that provide these global standards. And the higher Africa can get with all of its standards of infrastructure and air traffic navigation and everything else, the better that is for every airline using that airspace, that infrastructure, and the lower the premiums, because of course, the lower the risk. So I think making that point is super interesting because it shows how connected we are as an industry. Now, I did say before, and we're going to close up now, of course, the team are going to be with us at AviaDev in Zanzibar, going to do a really interesting session from the stage. And of course, that can then be a bit more interactive, multimedia, etc., because we'll have the physical opportunity to meet the team. But before we do that, I wanted to come to you, Michael, first and talk about the next generation of African aviation leaders. And what's your message to them when it comes to safety and insurance, and how bright you think the future is?
Just looking at my experience just last week in Afra, where I met a couple of the younger generation individuals who are making their own impact, be it in media, be it in ground handling. I think my message would be to, on one hand, continue to educate yourself, continue to be involved with obviously the current generation now that's making an impact or that's influencing a lot of the decisions, but be as integrated as you can be with the decision makers, with stakeholders, learn from them, put yourself in a position where you can absorb, take in, and understand why certain decisions have been made in the way that they've been made. And also just don't be afraid to put your voice out there. Don't be afraid to, if you feel that there's a certain practice that can be implemented or there's a certain procedure or metric that should be considered, put your voice out there. You never know how that might influence a business. And I think today in Africa, Africa and worldwide, there are a lot of individuals, young individuals who are ready to be involved, who are already involved in making an impact. And just collaboration in that sense. Collaboration, obviously, with the main stakeholders, current generation, but also collaboration amongst the young individuals as well, to start to build a network, this younger generation network that's connected, so that when the time does come for the handover, it's a handover to a united front. So I guess that'll be my message there.
I think that's really interesting. And I was just noting down then because it fits so much in line with what we're trying to do through this podcast, through the event. Is what we want to do is create a platform that is going to allow Africa to have its voice heard. We're not the spokespeople, but we're providing a platform for that to happen. And if you don't, I think this is the message of today. If you don't take this opportunity and tell your own story, others will use their prejudices, their assumptions to tell that story for you. And I think that is so exciting that we can now do that, and we do that through our platform. And obviously you guys have really put a lot of effort into the African market, which we all appreciate, and I'm sure the airlines will start to benefit, and they already are as well. So yeah, final word to you, Dennis, if you've got anything to add to what Michael said.
It's not a message to African leaders, it's to leaders of today and tomorrow. Please invest in your employees and make them real professionals, and make sure that they will choose to work with good professionals. That will drive the business really to a real good upgrade and make everybody's life better and easier.
That is culture. That is culture. And it takes time, but we're professionals in a very important business, moving millions of people every day. It's a very serious business. It needs to be professional. And I think, that is the other point, is that this is a culture that is across the globe, but of course it's Pan-African, and one experience that one airline has impacts the others. We've touched on that today, that you're looking at the overall safety rate of Africa. You can turn around and say, that airline's nothing like mine. Okay, but it's having an impact because their statistics are your statistics. So we've got to make each other accountable as well. And we've got to call out bad practice when we see it. And we've got to have, as you said, Dennis, commitment, passion for what you do, and seeing that bigger picture of how your experience, as we talked about, a flight safety officer, how they have a direct influence on the commercial performance of that airline, on everything that airline does, and then taking that seriously and realizing that they play a huge part in the success or otherwise of the whole ecosystem. So what a great place to leave it. It's a really nice sort of rallying call for the industry. As I said, obviously Dennis and Michael will be with us in Zanzibar. I'll put their links in the show notes so you connect with them on social media before. Some of you will be able to organize meetings with the guys as well while they're there, but they will have an exhibition stand, so go and say hi to them now that you've listened to the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, hit share, and share it with somebody in your network that you think will benefit from having a listen. And we'll be back for the next episode very soon. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and thanks to Dennis and Michael. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you much. Bye.
Thank you.